trolling around to make sure that folks are muted and whatnot. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming out to this meeting and welcome our presentation. And our presentation for this evening is Wolf, who will be talking to us. Well, a brief introduction. Wolf is the only programmer I know that has an IMDb page. He was in the documentary Code Rush. He worked over at Netscape around the same time that Netscape became Mozilla. He's also worked at various places like GeekNet, which was part of SourceForge, or had SourceForge, and worked over in many, many various hats over there as well. He's an amazing person, and I look forward to the presentation he's about to present on modern shell tools. Take it away, Wolf.
Thank you. Howdy, everybody. So this is going to be a new kind of presentation for me. I'm using a different kind of tool, which I'm going to share my screen right now, which I think is under the ... It's not share video, though. What is it?
It should be under share your screen. So it should be like the third one over from the left, third button.
It's a whole button on its own.
Yeah, I see. It's a button on its own.
Yep. It's so important they give it its own button.
All right. It looks funny in the picture. What color does it look like to you guys?
It's got a white background and it's got a green bottom on it.
All right, that's right. It just looks funny in the picture where my face used to be. Very strange. Looks pink. So I'm using a tool today that is a command line presentation tool. So I'm giving this presentation about command line tools on the command line. So it's going to be rough. We'll see how it goes. This is all new to me. So first, let me tell you who I am. My name is Wolf. I've been a software engineer for a very long time. I'm a strong fan of automation, and that is going to have an impact on the things that I say and do tonight. I'm a programmer because I'm so lazy. I want things to be done for me, and so that's the automation angle for me. I use Bash constantly. There are other shells in the world. I've heard this. I don't use very many of them, so I don't have a great deal of knowledge about them. But I've heard some are pretty good. I've tried them occasionally, but I always seem to come back to Bash. I guess there's two editors in the world that people like to fight about. I don't have a problem with either one of them. I'm not an Emacs guy. Vim is typically the editor that I choose, and that's going to color this presentation a bit when I do typing. Where I talk about tools here that have keyboard input and use keyboard bindings, they universally provide for both Emacs and Vim, and usually Emacs is the default. So if you're an Emacs user, you're in pretty good shape. And I've picked out a particular set of tools. Most of them are tools that I use myself every day and really like. Some of them are tools that are popular and interesting and new, but that I don't use myself. And I'll point out which ones I'm familiar with and which ones I'm not. So I'm going to give you the upfront which tools we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about TLDR, which I guess stands for too long didn't read. It's not a substitute for man, but it's another source of information that's much lighter weight than man. And BAT, which is a drop-in replacement for cat. AsFree does exactly what it says on the box. It takes input of file paths and prints them out in the shape of a tree. It's what tree would do, except when you have more fine-grained control over what you put into it, where tree doesn't really have that fine-grained control. SD is a search and replace tool. SD actually stands for search and displace. I don't know why they said that. That just seems strange to me. Amber is a pair of tools together that does the same thing, search and replace. AMBS is the search version. AMBR is the replace version. EXA is a replacement for LS. It's not drop-in compatible, but it's got colors and secret powers, and it does all kinds of good things. So I'm going to talk about that. HTTPie. I don't use HTTPie, but it becomes super popular. It can be used in the way that we use curl. It's great for testing APIs. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. JQ is a JSON query language. Basically, it's like sed or awk or grep specifically for JSON. mcfly is a replacement for your control R in your shell. Ripgrep is a super fast version of grep. FD is a replacement for find. I love it. It's way easier to use than find. Find just breaks my brain every time I try to get something out of it. And FZF I think is the crux of this presentation. I know I'm saving it till last, but in my opinion, it's the biggest deal. FZF is a very simple building block out of which you can make really complicated and useful tools. I want you to see all of these. I want to introduce them to you because some of them are going to make you happy. But SDF is short for fuzzy finder, by the way. But I'm going to specifically focus on the last three: ripgrep, FD, and FZF, especially FZF. The way I've put together the slides, every other slide is what I'm about to perform as a live demo. I'm going to skip over those slides and actually do them live, but I'm leaving them in the presentation so that when I hand out the markdown source for this presentation, you'll see what the commands are and you can use them yourself. And I'm going to save time at the end for questions and extra demos. We can look at anything you want to look at. We can make anything happen that you want to happen. That'll be the fun part. So I guess the central question for all this is, does the command line still matter? Yeah, of course it does. I'm not going to argue that. It's pretty much obvious to everybody. I mean, that's why you're here. So let's do this. All right, let's start with TLDR. TLDR is simplified and community driven. People are cooperating to make these little markdown pages that are very simple and describe just the best examples of how a particular tool works. And the reason they do this is because man pages are ridiculous. I mean, you can get everything you want out of a man page, and you're still probably going to go to man pages sometimes, but sometimes you just need a few examples. I'm providing links, which you'll be able to extract from the markdown source after I've shared it with you. The TLDR project has a web page of its own, and that web page has a list of clients because there's a ton of different clients for TLDR. Supposedly, the most advanced one is written in Node, but the one that I use is called TLDR, and it is written in Rust. They're all spelled TLDR. No matter which one you get, you type TLDR in the command line to give you the answer. There's no configuration, but they do, some of them, cache the pages locally, and when that's the case, TLDR minus U will update your cache. A couple things to note about it. Not every topic is covered. They're getting there. They have a lot of things covered, and they accept pull requests and translation. They come in many different languages. I've got a link here to a sample page. This one is for CP, for copy, and it's in English, and you can follow that link. It's important to know that TLDR doesn't replace man. It's not an in-depth source of knowledge. It's just an introduction. TLDR is to a specific tool sort of what I am to this group of tools. I'm giving you an introduction to a bunch of them, but we're not going to go all that deep on it.
Wolf,
Yeah.
Just a question.
Yeah.
You have TLDR, reference to, they're spelled differently. So are they the same thing or?
They are. I've made a spelling mistake on the.
Okay.
I have to fix that.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I Googled it and then it gave me the other one and then your reference showed up. So just checking.
Yep, you're right. You got me. I use TLDR all the time, and sometimes I follow up with man, but often TLDR is enough. So let's take a look. First, let's see what man tells us about LX. There's 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pages. Man gives you 11 pages of information about LS. Let's see what TLDR gives us. So it's slightly longer than my screen. I'm going to scroll just a bit. You can see what was off screen was list directory content. It gives several examples, all of which are things that you are very likely to want to do. Let's take a look at some other examples. TLDR command. Command is built into the shell. This is something you'd normally have to say help command. You couldn't say man command. You'd say help. And this gives 2 good examples of how command works. Cat is interesting. Also fits on the screen. Tells you everything important about cat. And let's take a look at one more. Find. Find is pretty big. It goes slightly off the top of the screen, as you can see. It started right there. Find is annoying to me because it's not dash option. It's dash option. And the way you combine things with dash not and dash or and dash prune, oh, it just, like I said before, it breaks my brain. It makes it very hard for me to understand what's going on. All right, so that's TLDR. And those are what we looked at. Now let's look at BAT. I really love BAT. I use BAT all the time. It's a drop-in replacement for cat, but it's only a drop-in replacement for cat when the output is going to a non-interactive terminal. When you want to look inside a file and see what's really in there, BAT beats cat because it does syntax coloring and paging and a whole bunch of other things. It's got a GitHub project. There's installation instructions. Automatic pager, which defaults to less, but you can control it in your configuration. It does syntax highlighting, and we're going to take a look at that. It's got Git integration, something that cat totally lacks. And it has different themes. So there is configuration for it in XDG config home, the place where configuration normally happens on Linux. These commands will show you where exactly it lives on your particular system. And you can also generate a starting configuration file with a specific command. You can add syntaxes and themes. I used to know what the syntaxes and themes, they follow some editor. I think they follow the editor. No, I can't remember. But a couple observations. It's written in Rust. It's better than cat when you're printing files to the terminal. because of all the coloring and paging and Git integration. It's exactly like cat when printing multiple files to something other than the terminal. So if you're catting into a file or into another process, it's gonna act just like cat. And I use it all the time. In fact, I don't have cat. I alias cat to bat. So whenever I say cat, I'm really saying bat. And there's a new program on the horizon. It's just coming into existence. It's called Rich, CLI. It's a Python tool, and it looks like it's going to do a lot of the stuff bat does and maybe even more. All right, so let's take a look. First, let's see what TLDR says about bat. Bat clone. You can bat an individual file. You can bat multiple files into a target file, append, number the output lines, look at JSON, whatever, list languages. We're gonna do a couple of these. Let's start with my ignore file. So a couple things to see here. It is printing a nice table for me. This is how I have the default setup in my configuration. It prints the file name. It notes that tags is an added line with respect to Git. My Git ignore is checked in, but it hasn't been committed with this added line yet. And a thing to know is we are ignoring two directories that are in my current, the current directory that we're in right now, and that is .files and photos. We're going to care about that later. So remember that we're ignoring .files and photos. In fact, let's go into .files and let // tools. I'm going to bat a Python file, and this file's been modified. I don't know if you can see my cursor, my pointer, but right here is a line that got deleted. This is all pretty printed for Python. Right here are a set of blank lines I added. And here are a bunch of lines that I changed. And in fact, let's take a look at this. Hit shift and $. There's the line I deleted. There are the lines that I added. And here are the lines that I changed. I turned that else into an elif and outdented everything that was under it. And cat showed me that. Bat showed me that. Let's get out of here and let's look at some files that I've got. I have 3 text files. Let me bat them. And you can see I can tell where one starts and the other one leaves off. When I bat 3 files, I get 3 individual displays, but they come out at me all at once. But I can see where the dividing lines are. On the other hand, if I were to bat star.text and send the output into WSC minus count the number of lines in there, the number of lines is 3. It doesn't get any of this other junk. It just gets the actual content of those 3 files. Bat knows a bunch of languages. These are the languages that it knows how to do syntax highlighting for. So there's quite a few. And it knows about themes. Bat minus list themes. It is going to actually show me the themes here. You can see the different colors. Let's take a look at those in various backgrounds and whatnot. So here it is with a dark background. This is a light background. This is what I use for my background, solarized light. But you can see the themes are different from each other. For instance, here this is green. Oops. This one is green, but this one is brown. These are light colored. This is a good one for a dark background, but not good for a light background, etc., etc. And that is that. Let's talk about AsFree. This is an easy one. AsFree doesn't do very much, but what it does very well. It is a composable tool to take a list of paths and draw them as a tree. It's perfect for when the tree tool itself doesn't give you the kind of filter that you need to get to just the files that you care about. It has a GitHub project and installation instructions. It's probably available with your package manager. It was with mine on my Ubuntu box, but I installed it with Brew on my Macintosh. There's no configuration. A couple things to note about it. It's written in Rust. I use it occasionally. And let's take a look at a demo. So first, let's use find and see what we find. Find dot minus name star.bash is going to list all the files I have underneath me that end with .bash. I've got quite a few. Notice that find didn't know to ignore .files. .files is in my git ignore, but find did not ignore it. It just dove right in and found these files. Let's take this thing that I just typed and let's send it into AsFree. And now I get out of it a nice tree. .files at the top, everything in bash topics.d, and something in test. And that's really all there is to say about AsFree. It is a pretty simple tool, but it does the job. All right. So let's talk about SD. SD is search and displace, which I think is a terrible, terrible name. But you get what you get. It's supposed to be intuitive, and it's a simple tool for when you don't want to write a sed program. I mean, sed is its own whole programming language. It has a GitHub project with installation instructions. It works with the regex syntax you already know from JavaScript and Python, or with fixed strings. And it's nice because it can preview the file changes without actually making them. No configuration is needed. And some things to know about it, it's written in Rust. Kind of a theme here. It's not a drop-in replacement for sed. It just does find and replace. Sed is so much more powerful. You can still use sed. This isn't going to make sed leave your system. Sed is still available for you when you need it. But if you just want to do something simple, SD might be your tool. I almost never do multi-file search and replace. And when I do, I'm usually using Vim at the moment, or I'm in an IDE, and my editor will do it for me. So I'm not a real SD user. Let's take a look at how it actually works. So first, let's see what TLDR says about it. It looks like it takes standard input. It understands regular expressions. It'll do a preview given a file, and you can pass in a list of files and it'll just do the whole job. So let's try a couple things. I'm going to use standard input at first. So what this says is send in hello world, all lowercase, and SD is going to replace lowercase h with capital H. Yes, I could have used TR for this, but I am demoing a product, so I'm not going to use TR. And so that made the H capitalized. Now I'm going to send in hello world. I'm going to match everything up to the comma, and then all the word characters after the comma. This would be the first thing. It's called $1, and this one's called $2. I'm going to replace that with $2, $1. So I'm going to turn hello world. I'm going to reverse the word order. World hello. And not only does it accept index capture group, but it also accepts named capture group. So I am going to use TR here. And what I'm going to do, I'm echoing in hello world. I'm going to match the entire line, because just like the default for sed, and just like Amber, which I'm going to show you coming up next, and just like several other tools, ripgrep included, anything you don't explicitly match on the line is going to get piped through automatically. So it would match up this comma, which wouldn't get used, but everything before the comma would get piped out. So that's why I have to remember to grab the entire line and match everything if I only want to get out this one piece. And then this piece here, question mark capital P and then a name in angle brackets, that is a named capture group. And here I'm using it $2, and then piping that into TR. TR is going to capitalize it. So this should take the world part of hello world, match world as the second argument, as the second capture group, and then spit out just world and capitalize it. And that's what it did. So you saw those 3 text files that we had. Let us run SD on those files, star.txt, -p means preview, and we're going to replace the word file in each with fancy file, but it's only a preview. So another fancy file, a third and final fancy file, there was nothing to replace in the first file. And if I look at the original files, you can see another file, a third and final file. They weren't actually cut. But if I were to leave off the -p, try that. Now, if I cat, you can see it's fancy file and fancy file. They've been changed. And let's change them back, because we're going to use them again in a minute. And I'll just cat them again so you can see that they've been changed back. So that's SD. Super simple. Understands standard in. Works on regular expressions. It's fast. And does preview. So that's pretty nice. All right. Amber is exactly the same kind of thing. It's a search and replace tool when you don't want to write a whole sed program for multiple replacements. It has a GitHub project with installation instructions. It is different than SD. It's got other strengths. It supports multi-threaded searching when a file is larger than a megabyte. It has interactive replacing as the default, but you can turn that off. And it's Git aware. It knows how to ignore files and where to go, what to go into, which files not to touch. It does have configuration, and there's instructions for exactly what goes into those configuration files. And a couple things to say about it. It's written in Rust. It installs two binaries, AMBS and AMBR. One is for search, one is for replace. And I mentioned those before. And again, I hardly ever do this operation. I chose these two tools to talk about because they're both good, people like them, and they're useful. But they have different strengths. SD, I talked about already. Preview works on standard in. Amber parallel interactive replacing, knows about Git. Let's take a look at Amber and watch it actually run. So first we'll search for file, AMBS. Tell me where file is in star.txt. So it found two instances of it. Nice highlighting, showed me where it is. And now let's replace AMBR file with fancy file in star.txt. And it's going to ask me, do I want to replace that one? Well, no, I don't want to do any replacement right now. And no, I don't want to replace that one either. But actually, let's take a look. Let's do a search. Now remember, .files is ignored in my git ignore. So I'm going to do an AMBS, an Amber search for a function called getTopic. And it only finds it here in my actual presentation. This is the file that I'm running with right now and that I'm going to share with you, the MD file, Markdown presentation file. So I mentioned getTopics in a couple times, but that's not where I want to change getTopic. So I'm going to cd into .files, and now I'm going to do that search again. And now it finds in my test file, in my required functions include file, and in my show help function, my show help script, I use getTopic. Well, I want to change those. So let's do this. Oops. Let's change now. In all of those files, I haven't named any files, so it's going to do it to everything it finds that matches the rules for git ignore and whatnot. It's going to change the function name getTopic into collectTopic. And it's going to ask me each time. I'm not going to change any of them because what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do the whole thing non-interactively. I'm not going to get asked for any of them. It's just going to change them all. So let's do it. So it just changed them all. I'm not going to fix them right now. I'm not going to change them back to what they were because I'm going to show you something about them later. In the meantime, let's go back. I can actually do a git def. And you can see here, getTopic became collectTopic. And there, and there, and there, and there. It just got it everywhere. And I'm going to pop D out of here. And I'm going to show you that AMBR also works with capture groups and regular expressions and named capture groups. So in this example here, I say minus minus regex because that's not the default. I have to match the whole string again. Otherwise, stuff pops through like I mentioned earlier. Question mark P is a named capture group, and I'm calling this one second. And I'm going to replace just second in my star.text file. So let's run it. So do I want to replace in batme1.text hello world with world? And it turns out that I don't. And that is AMBR and AMBF. You guys doing okay so far? I'm going to assume that means yeah.
Yeah, we're good. There was one question, though, about which presentation tool you're using.
I'm going to talk about it at the end and provide links, but it's called MDP.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to, everything that I'm using tonight, I'm going to provide a reference to. All right, let's talk about EXA. We're getting closer and closer to all of the things that I use most frequently. EXA is really important to me. In fact, I never use LF anymore. I always use EXA. But I type it LF. I have an alias for it. It has a whole website for itself. It's got a GitHub project. It's got installation instructions. It has Git integration. It can do the tree thing all by itself. It doesn't need tree or AsFree to do it. And it can show icons. It can leverage nerd font to get the icons it needs to show you what files mean. There's no special configuration needed. When you read the documentation, it describes the command line options as configuration. I don't think that counts. That doesn't count as far as I'm concerned. But it does listen to several environment variables, and one that's important is EXA colors. Just like there's LS colors, there's an EXA colors. And in the absence of EXA colors, EXA listens to LS colors. Some observations. It's written in Rust. It is not a drop-in replacement for LS. The reason why they say is because it has saner default. And as I was putting this presentation together, there was no Windows version of it, but the website says this is changing. So I'm expecting something soon. I use it constantly. In fact, LS means EXA for me, and LL means EXA with some options. So let's take a look at it. First, I will say, just show me everything in this directory. It looks just like LS. It's colorized as appropriate. And show it in a single column. You can show a long listing. That's abbreviated -L. You can see it colors the permission bit. That's kind of nice. And the column of dates is colored. That's kind of nice. Let's actually put a header on top of that. So EXA --long --, header, and let's put some icons next to it. And let's notice the Git status of these files. So here's the things to notice. Now there's a header: permissions, size, user, date modified. This is the Git status of it. And now the name has an icon next to it that says what kind of a thing it is. I don't know how well you guys can see these icons, but this is the one for Markdown. This is for an unknown file. JSON looks like a pair of curly braces. A directory looks like a folder. I guess this is blank because it's ignored, and this one is filled in because it's new. and this one has lines on it because it's a text file. So in the get column here, N means new, I means ignored, M means modified. And the two columns are what it is in your working copy, in your directory, and the leftmost column is what it is in your index. So let's actually turn this into a tree. I'm going to do everything I did before, except I'm also going to display it as a tree, but don't go deep. Just give me 3 levels. So I have lots of ignored files where it dove into dot files. But I still have everything before. I've got some ping files that we didn't look at. They have image icons, but you can see it's doing the tree thing and the get thing and the long listing thing and the colors all at the same time. Let's actually push D into the dot file directory. And let's go whole hog. So minus show me everything. A is for all. L is for long. T is for tree. L is for level. We're just going to show 2 levels. And there's no short thing to say icons or get. And now we see bash files and directories that it didn't decide to go down into. Red for executable. This one's modified because we changed get topics inside there to collect topics. These are all modified for the same reason. And so here it's doing everything. So I really like it. I really like EXA. It is a good tool. Let's get out of this directory. And as I said before, I alias ls to EXA and ll to EXA minus FAL. F is show the file type. A is all and L is long. All right. So HTTPie, you use it for testing APIs and for fetching files and pushing files to HTTP sources, remote endpoints. It's better than curl at testing APIs. It has a website and a GitHub project. It is a Python program, so you could normally install it with pip if you're using a virtual environment and you want it to only be in that virtual environment. But I think you can install it with almost any package manager. I installed it with Brew, and that worked for me. They are working on a GUI version that's currently in beta. It has extensive documentation. It does some important stuff. Pretty prints the output. Supports JSON automatically. It's got everything. Persistent sessions, cookie support, resumable downloads, so many things. Configuration isn't really needed, though there's docs on it. But you can run HTTP debug and look for config.dir to see where your configuration would live anyway. Some observations. This one's written in Python. It installs 2 binaries. One is named HTTP, and the other is named HTTPS. And I think those are awful names. They seem like mistakes waiting to happen, as far as I can tell. I never had used this tool before preparing for this talk, but people talk about it all the time, so I figured I had to mention it. And let's get a demo, but not a really deep demo because I'm not an HTTPie user, so I don't know a ton about it. So we'll see what we can do. So first, let's take a look and see what that instruction was for HTTP debug. Prints a bunch of stuff. Let's just find the config.dir. So up into grep for config.dir. Well, that was weird. I don't understand that. But config.dir is here.
Well, that's just one long line that contains new lines in it, right?
That must
Or
be it.
something. Yeah.
One long line that's getting pretty printed somehow. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But this is where the configuration lives. It lives in XDG home, XDG config home.
Okay.
Let's actually contact a website. I hate it when my hands are on the wrong keys. HTTPS go. This is DuckDuckGo, a lot of HTML. Here's the stuff up front. Content security policy is pretty extensive. Doc type HTML, this seems pretty nice. Let me do an ls to see what files I have. You can see I don't have any gzip files. Let's actually use HTTPie to download. I'm going to minus download from the HTTPie archive on GitHub, their master branch compressed into a gzip file. Ready? Here we go. So this is the information about the request. It's finished. That's what the done means. It was 1.12 megabytes in size. And now if I do an ls, you can see I have an httpie-master.tar.z. It made up that name based on where it got it from. You could actually give it an explicit name, but it makes up pretty good names. So that's reasonable. All right. Look at JQ. Now, JQ is a pretty complicated tool. It is a complete language in much the same way that sed and awk are. But instead of for playing with text, it plays with JSON. It's got a website and a GitHub project. It has installation instructions. It's got extensive documentation, a lot of documentation. It does some important things. Pretty prints JSON. It extracts stuff, maps stuff, renames stuff, does math, does comparisons, uses regular expressions. It is a programming language for JSON. There's no configuration. And some things to talk about. It's written in C. It comes with an online sandbox, which I'm not going to show you because it's a web page, and I'm doing this all in the command line. But it's a nice little web page where you can paste some JSON and then run some JQ on it. I don't use it very much, but it's super powerful and super useful. So I had to talk about it. Let's take a look at how it works. So I have a file here called sample.json. Let's see what it looks like inside. It's got an outer level object named widget. It's got an array in it named people with elements in that. Before we actually use JQ, let's TLDR JQ. Tells you some things that JQ can do. We're going to do some of these right now. If I cat sample.js, sample.json, into JQ, it's going to pretty print the JSON. You can see it has different highlighting now than it did when I sent it through BAT. The other way to say it is you can say JQ dot is a transformation. It's the identity transformation. Whatever you send in will get sent out, but JQ always pretty prints. So the identity transformation also pretty prints the result. So sample.json does the same thing that we just saw. We're going to use cat from now on, though. So actually, let me copy and paste to get stuff. So what this does, cat, it's going to cat sample.json, and it is going to fetch out from the top level, that's what that dot is, the object named widget, the field named image, the field of that object named source. It's going to get the value of that. And that is images/sun.ping, as you can see right here. We can actually reach into arrays as well. So this time I'm still going to the widget object, but now I'm going to the people array inside it and grabbing element 0. That's what that means. And that's Wolf. And I can make a brand new, this is just another example of what it can do. I can make a brand new JSON object from it. Here I'm gonna, the curly braces mean I'm creating a new object. Who is the object name, and the value that I'm going to get for the object, whose key will be who, is whatever's in widget and whatever the people field of widget is. So this is going to spit out a new hunk of JSON that has a field named who and whose value is an array. Right there. So you can imagine this on a larger scale. This is just like SED, but for JSON. It's really incredible. All right, mcfly. This is the hardest one to demonstrate. A lot of you probably use Control R. Do you guys all use Control R? I'm going to assume you do without even listening to you because you're all muted. But everybody uses Control R. But Control R mostly sucks. mcfly is a replacement for Control R. It's on GitHub, just like all of these things are. It's got installation instructions. It shows you the history, which is what Control R normally does. But the history that it shows you is controlled by what you did the last time you were in this directory, what you did the last time you had just entered the command you just entered, what you did when the exit status of the previous command was what it is, timestamp. It uses all these things to populate a neural network and make a good decision about what to show you and how to order the possibility. It's slightly configurable. I'll show you a little bit more later. This is a sample that I grabbed from my startup files. I set the background scheme to be light, the key scheme to be Vim, and I set the fuzziness of it search to 3. That's a number between 1 and 5, and 3 seems to work good. 2 or 3 seem to be good value. I don't know which end of the spectrum is which, or why you have to specify it, but there. Some observations. It's written in Rust. Surprise, surprise. And I use it all the time. Let's take a look. Let's just do this. Git st is something that I do often. Brew update is something that I do. Let's start with something like FD is a thing I'm going to show you later, but FD minus U means show me ignored files. Minus E means extension, and minus ping is the extension to look for. So let's actually look at that one. That finds the files in my photos directory. mcfly is super powerful. Let's actually say FD, Control R, and let's take a look at one I don't like. I'm going to use Vim fans now. I'm hitting J, and I don't like this minus XRM because it turns out minus capital X is not a way you can call RM. You have to use lowercase x. So let me hit F2 to delete this item from history. Yes, I would like to delete this item from history. So now it's gone. So now if I say FD Control R, I don't get that one anymore. It doesn't pop up. A way that I use this a lot is I'm going to push D to my actual real .files directory. And a thing that I often do from here is I git push. It knows that I like to push to origin first, and then I like to push to GitHub. And sometimes I have to force push the dev branch because I'm constantly reordering them, constantly rebasing them. So let's go back to where we were. And let me show you my actual configuration file for this. FE is a tool I'm going to explain to you later. Minus UU means find hidden files and don't ignore git files that it would otherwise ignore, and show me fly.bash. And here it is. You initialize it with an eval, and then here are those values that I showed you before that I export. I'm going to show you FE later, I promise. It's going to be good. Oh, we're getting into the good ones now. This is pretty exciting. I'm getting excited because we're getting to my favorite one. So we are now going to talk about ripgrep. These last three that I'm going to talk about, ripgrep or RG, FD, the replacement for find, and FDF, they are my absolute favorites, and I use them like crazy. So ripgrep is a modern replacement for grep. It's amazingly fast. The stats are on its website, which you can see by going to either one of these links. It has Git integration, so it respects Git ignore files and rules. Mostly configuration not needed, but you can make a configuration file and configure a few things. There's a few things you can set. The documentation you'll find at that place will tell you what. It's written in Rust, of course. The binary is named RG. It is not a drop-in replacement for grep, unfortunately. It's a little easier to use, and it has a little saner default. And because it respects Git, you can't use it in exactly the same way that you can use grep. And I use it all the time. I have several bash functions that I've built around it. I like to build bash functions rather than usually using aliases. I have a few aliases, but I prefer functions because they let me stick arguments in the middle when I want to, instead of always at the end like an alias does. So let's see what we can do with RG. Let's start with TLDR of RG. So it searches for regular expressions. No ignore hidden is so common that it's abbreviated minus UU. You can say specific file type. There's a couple things. We're going to do several of these. Let's actually jump into the .files directory because we can find some stuff better in there, and let's look for a word regular expression. So it's only going to find word boundaries of bat. We use bat in lots of places. So here's where we did the search, and it finds each place where it finds something, it prints a header. That's the default, and a line number. If you say no headers, then the file name and line number come together, and all the lines touch each other. If you say no headers and no files, then you just get the match. But you can see here, it highlights the match, just like grep does. I think grep does this. Now I don't remember. Let's actually do a more complicated search. This time, -t is short for minus type. sh means a shell file. So it's going to look for things that end with .bash or .sh or whatever. And it's going to look for lines that begin with, that's what that caret means, the word function, and then the longest sequence of something that starts with a lowercase letter and continues with some number of, boy, that should be a star. I should have made that be a star. Some number of going to edit this and make it be a star. To find some number of characters. So what this does is this prints out the line that matches every one of the functions that I define. Every function that you see here is a function I define in some file. Not all of them get defined on every platform. You can see here, this one, it doesn't tell you this, but I'm telling you now that because it has Linux in the path there, these versions of those functions are only defined when you're running on a Linux host. So let me complicate the situation even further. I'm not going to replace the star, replace the plus this time. This time I'm matching the entire line because I want to eat up all those characters that I didn't match. I don't want to spit out this part of the line. I want to match everything so that when I print out just the capture group, I get just the capture group. This is exactly like SD and Amber and grep and sed. You have to match the whole line to consume the pieces. So ripgrep takes this minus replace parameter. This is not going to change any file. Ripgrep never changes files. What this does is it replaces whatever the output would have been with whatever you say. And $1 here is the index capture. So I'll hit return. And now it's just the function name without the word function, without the first line of the function, and still organized under header. So let's complicate this even more. This time, no heading and no file name. So that means it's just going to be the function name all by itself. This is the same regular expression that we've been used to. It eats up the entire line. I'm still going to replace and only print with -1, or only print the first capture group. And then I'm going to send it into sort and keep only the unique value. So this should print an alphabetized, unique list of all my functions. And there we go. It's actually shorter than what you were seeing before because there's lots of duplicates. I have to rewrite some things for certain platforms. Now, let's get simple again. You can just list the files in which something appears. -W is short for word regx. So here we're looking for bat only where it appears as a complete word by itself. And instead of showing the matches, just show me the file names of the matches. So there's where it hits. This actually helps me build some functions. I've got a couple of really interesting ones. I want to talk about 3 of them right now. One is called G, one is called GE, and one is called GV. So first, let's take a look at G. Like I said, I usually prefer a function to an alias, but this is my way of calling ripgrep with specific options that I think are super useful to me and passing in whatever parameters I also say. So for instance, I can say E minus U minus W bat. And I'll find all the bats again. Let's take a look at GE. This is my tool to edit things. Type GE. This time, it just lists the files with matches. It separates them with zeros, like find can. Pipes that into xargs, which launches my editor. So if I took the previous command, G, and let's edit this and make it be GE, this is going to open my editor with however many files this is, 5. Let's actually count the buffers. 8 total files, which I can cycle between, but they are in Windows. So I can DT. I suppose I should have this turned so that you can see when I say DT, quit all. And finally, I want to show you GV. GV is the most exciting because I'm a Vim user, and Vim has a specific feature called the quick fix list. And in Vim, if you have formatted something to be acceptable as input to the quick fix list, you can say -Q when you launch the editor, and then provide a file. That's what this is. This is process substitution. Process substitution is like making a file with the contents of running this command and passing that file name to whatever thing you have before it. So this is going to call ripgrep with this specific vimgrep option, which formats
Still there?
Yeah. Hello?
Hello? Yeah, your screen for whatever reason stopped sharing.
It did.
And then I came back.
Oh, it did? All right.
It's there now.
Okay. So let's change the command that we just used, where we said GE, and let's change that to GV. And now we only have one buffer open, dir colors, but you can see down here This is the quick fix list navigation pane. It's the command area, but it's telling me there's 15 matches in my quick fix list, and I'm at number 1. And you can see not only am I at number 1, it has actually put the insertion point, it's put the cursor at the first letter of the match. And I can go to the next one, which you see right here. And the next one, which you see right here. We're going to talk about ZE, this function ZE, in a little bit. It's actually pretty cool. And the next one is here. So I could step through all of these, but I think you get the idea. And finally, let's pop out of here. We turn off the key sharing. All right. So that's ripgrep. And let's talk about FD. We're just getting better and better. FD is so useful to me. Because I hate find. I don't know how many of you like find. Find is just impenetrable to me. FD has a GitHub project. It's written by the same guy who wrote Back, I think. Maybe that's right. I'd have to look to see. A couple of these were written by the same guy. I have to remember who wrote what. It's got Git integration, so it respects your git ignore files and rules, like a couple other of these tools do. Just like find, it can exec programs, but it can exec them in parallel if you want. No configuration is needed. It's written in Rust. It is not a drop-in replacement for find because it actually works and takes minus options instead of minus options, and doesn't use all that gross minus or and minus prune and all that crap. And I use it all the time. I've got a ton of functions built around it. It's key to me using my machine. So let's take a look. First, let's see what TLDR has to say about it. TLDR is pretty succinct. It says a few things about patterns and exec and whatnot. I'm going to go into my .files directory again. That's where a lot of useful stuff lives. And I'm just going to look for stuff that has tests in the name. FD is searching for regular expressions by default. Regular expressions match anywhere in the name, so there can be stuff before or after. So this is matching directory names and file names. If I wanted to match just that file that ended with -test, I could say FD -test, but because that looks like an option or a set of options, I have to say FD -- and then -test. I guess technically I don't need quotes on this, but I'm going to put them there anyway. And that lets me find just the one that I cared about in this instance. Let's actually search for a regular expression. Now, regular expressions are the default, but I'm going to stick it on there anyway just to say. And -- hidden is going to let it descend into my .bash topic directory. So it's going to look for any file that ends with .bash. This is not the best way to do this, but it's a way, and there it found them. Instead, well, we looked at regex. Let's look at glob for a second. This time, I'm going to -h is the same as --- hidden. Minus capital H is the same as hidden. Minus minus glob is the opposite of minus minus regex, and it does the thing that ls does. Is my screen still sharing?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to look for vim.bash. And if I hit return, I find it. Now, let's actually search in a different directory. That's a thing find can do. In fact, find, you have to specify the directory first. In FD, you specify the pattern to match first. If you just want to match anything, you put a dot and then the directory that you care about. And now here's the better way to find all my bash files. It's to say minus minus extension. There's a shorter way to say that, which is minus E. We're going to do that in a second. So now I'm going to go into this bash topics.d directory and find only the files that end with .bash. And that means it's going to ignore this run all test.bash file. You can use FD to find all the files. Let's even descend into my hidden stuff. So if I just say FD minus capital H, it's going to find everything. Let me scroll, and you can see I have a lot of files. It did not find anything that I ignored. It didn't go into my .git directory or anything like that. It just found the stuff that is important. And of course, this is the time when you want AsFree. And that shows you all the files arranged as a tree as found by FD. But FD can do some interesting things that find can do. It turns out that all of the files in the directory that we're looking at right now were made within the last 3 weeks because that's when I did the checkout. But let's go to my real .files directory. And let's look for any files that were changed within the last 2 weeks. And that's a lot of files. I changed a bunch of files within the last 2 weeks. Let's find the opposite. Let's find something that's old. So this says anything that's 2 years old or older. And it turns out only my neovim.config file is that old. And if this was, say, my temp directory, everything in my temp directory is new, so I couldn't use the temp directory as my demonstration. I had to use something that had stuff from a while ago. But if this was my temp directory, I could have easily said, find everything that's 2 weeks old or older, and RM it. I don't want to RM my config file, so I'm not going to run this, but this is a thing you could do in your temp directory, for instance. So let's get out of here. Still in .files. So I have a ton of functions that are based on FD. I'm going to talk about 4 of them right now. Just like I have a G function for ripgrep, I have an F function for FD. And it uses glob because glob is the thing I usually want to type, follows links, and looks at hidden files. But it still ignores things that git ignore tells you to ignore. So I use F all the time. So I could say F fly.bash, and it finds it. I have a function called fcat. Fcat does an exec, and this shouldn't be an exec batch. This should just be an exec. I need to fix that. but it calls bat on the thing that you found from FD. So let's say fcat mcfly.bash. So it's going to use FD to find it, and then it's going to bat. And there it is, just like we saw before. FCD is more complicated than these because it uses, first it finds type directory, D for directory, and second, it only finds the first thing and then stops. Max result 1. So the first matching directory is the directory that matches the pattern that's supplied, or nothing. If there's an error, there's no output. If that directory exists, then CD there. I'm not going to demonstrate it, but that's how. And finally, I'm going to show you a function that I use all the time, and that is FE. F for find, E for edit. This opens up all of the files that it finds that match that name in the editor. And my editor is vim minus p in this case. Minus p means whatever files you get, open them up as separate tabs. So if I say fe r.bash, and I'm going to edit 13 files or 31 files. And I will turn on my key casting again. You can see all these files end with .bash, and they all do stuff for me. Most of them are small. And to get out of here, I have to quit all of them, because that's the thing about tabs, is you have to quit them one at a time or all at once. Finally, let's pop D out of here. Oh, let me fe.bashrc. Bashrc is in the bash directory, and it's got a bunch of stuff in it. And I just went straight to it. I didn't have to type a path or anything. Just .bashrc. That's why I love FE and use it constantly. All right, and finally, one more complicated thing. Let's be out of here. So you see I've got the photos directory. Let me turn off TCAP. And ls photos. I've got a bunch of ping files in there. I am going to find those files. Remember, photos was ignored in my .getignore, so I have to say no ignore. I'm looking for everything that's a ping. I'm going to exec the convert tool, which is a part of ImageMagick. I'm going to use placeholders. This is a feature of FD for when you're using exec. The two curlies mean the file as you found it. Curly dot curly means the file as you found it, but chop off the extension, and then I'm sticking on the JPEG extension. So what that's going to do is it's going to convert, say, image334.ping to image334.jpg, and convert understands what to do when you give it two different extensions like that. It understands, oh, I'm converting from a ping to a JPEG. So when I do this, it's going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new JPEGs. So let's run it. Somebody wants to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering how you do that where your keystrokes show up in the lower right. That's great for demos.
It is, and just like all the tools I'm using tonight, I'm going to talk about it at the end. It's an open source tool called Keycaster, and I'll provide links to it.
Okay, thanks.
So here I have the JPEG files that I just built using FD. And that is FD. And finally, we get to the most powerful tool in the toolbox. This is the thing we've been dying to talk about. And that is FZF. FZF is incredibly simple. All it does is take a list and display the list and let you pick something from the list. That's it. That's the entire job that it does. So let me just clear the screen here. I have a bunch of files, and one of them is called choices.list. And if I cat choices.list, you can see it's got 7 different colors. If let me turn on Keycaster again. If I cat choices.list, sending the output into FZF, it brings up a little menu. And I can type the name of an item, like G for green, or E for yellow. Or I can use Control J because I'm using the Vim binding. Control J goes down, Control K goes up. And when I find the one that I want, I just hit return, and that's the one that I get. Blue in this case. All it did was print the answer. It didn't do anything else. All it does is present a list and print the answer. That's the entire job. It does have one little complication, which I'm going to show you right now. Right now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, this is stupid. Why does he care about this? This time, I'm going to use the tab key to select red, blue, and violet. So there's red. I'm going to use Control J to go down, tab for blue, Control J to go down, and tab for violet. Now I've selected red, blue, and violet, and when I hit return, it spits out red, blue, and violet. Why is this good? What good thing can you do with it? Well, let's actually build something with it. Let's go to my real .files directory, and I'll show you why in a second. PDF. So the thing that's interesting about this is if I say git branch ---- list, you can see I have 4 branches. Or let's say git branch ---- list -a, and I've got a bunch of remotes also. So git branch is a list. So we could feed git branch into FZF. And that would let us pick a branch, like tools presentation by just typing T. Or if I wanted to get something that started with M, or if I wanted to get something that specifically said only. Now, there we go. And it spits out that branch. We're getting closer to actually doing something interesting. But these branches have blanks in front of them, and the active branch has a star in front of them. So let's use cut to cut off everything before the third character. This says cut using character counts and keep character 3 to the end of the line. So now all these will be left aligned and there won't be a star, as you can see. Now let's put that into FZF. Yeah, and let's pick main. So what we really want to do is we want to take the operation that we've been doing, which is pick a branch. We want to switch to that branch. But if you didn't pick a branch, we don't want to print any error message. So let's try that. Right now, we're on the tools presentation branch. Let's switch to the local only branch. So local only. And now we're on the local only branch. Let's go to the dev branch. And now we're on the dev branch. So this is interesting, but typing that out every time is horrifying. Why not just type git switch dev? That seems way, way easier. So let's actually turn this into a function. So we'll call it ZSwitch, and it does everything that we just said, but all as a function, and it's going to take parameters. Whatever parameters you give to ZSwitch are going to become the parameters to get branch. So let's define that function, and now let's say ZSwitch. We can just say nothing at all, and we can pick tools presentation, and it switches. Or we can say, show us all the branches, and switch to one of those. It turns out that switching to a remote branch is not exactly what you want, so I'm not going to actually do it. But let's pick nothing and see that there's no error. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a bash function that I have constructed from FZF and FD to edit files. And it is, it lives in fdf.bash. So fe fdf.bash. Nope, that's not the one I want. This is the one I want. So this is complicated. I call it ZE. That's the function name. It uses FD to build a list. That list is of things that are typed file, and they're filtered by whatever parameter I send into ZE. I send that into FZF. This print 0 corresponds to this read 0. This print 0 corresponds to xargs minus 0. Multi means I can check multiple files. And this preview window is a whole feature of FZF that I haven't explained yet, where FZF can actually show you something about the list item that you're currently on. And the way it does that is it runs a program. And the program it runs in this case is bat using colors, showing the header changes and grid of the file that FZF is currently selected. And it sends that into my editor. So that means I could ZE, I could ZE all by itself and find just fzf.bash or just fd.bash And when I hit, I could actually open 2 of them at the same time, hit return, there they are. Or I could only look at files that end with .bash. There's ripgrep. I've got that in a couple of places. Just show me that one. So that's building something in ZE, in FDF. But FDF has so many more powers than this. It comes with a bunch of stuff out of the box. Let's get out of my .files directory, and let's look at autocomplete with FDF. Now, this isn't real autocomplete. It's something funny, something different. I mean, I guess it's real autocomplete, but it doesn't work like autocomplete normally works in the shell. For instance, it uses ***. You can change the characters, but here's what happens. I can say vim *** and then hit tab, and I get a filterable list, just like in my ZE function. And it auto-completes the path name. So that's paths. Aliases. These are all things that have aliases. ECO I could do. I don't actually want to unalias anything, so I'm going to Control U that. It knows what host you have. Let me make room and say SSH ** tab. And it's showing me a short list, but if I type Z, it's showing me more items that it found off the bottom of that list. I actually want to go here. That's my Ubuntu server. So I could go there if I wanted to. It knows how to complete variables. So let's look at anything that starts with FZF or has FDF in it. That single quote means match exactly. Don't just look for those letters. If I type FDF, well, it always finds them. But E, T, E, E. See how in editor it shows that E and T are both in that word, so editor is found. But if I said single quote ET, it wouldn't find anything because it wants ET together. It wants an exact match. If I just wanted things that started with FZF, that would only gather two of the three things that start with FZF. Anyway, it will complete DIRs, directories. So let's go to test data. It will complete processes. I really like this. -9 ***. Let's look for options. So let's say I wanted to kill the Logi options plus, this is my mouse driver. I could do that. I love that I can FDF for kill minus stuff. That just seems great. And finally, it knows how to do this for options for FDF, but I have never gotten this to work. So I don't know what this one is about. It doesn't do anything for me. I don't understand. All right. So that's the FZF out of the box. But what about specific applications of FZF? It turns out there's a product called Forgit. It's free. It's open source. Boy, I should have a link to it here. That's unfortunate. I feel bad about that. Let's see what Forgit gives you. So we're going to do that by saying alias and just show me the aliases that have Forgit in the name. So add, check out a branch, check out a file, reset head. So let's cd pushb.files, and know we've got some modified stuff from when we changed get topics into collect topics, and I want to change everything back except show help helper.py. So I can git reset head. No, let's do a git add, and I can add show help and not show help helper and required func and bash tap. I can add all those to the get topic change. And if I hit return right now, it would do that, but I'm not going to do that. GLO shows you the log. Don't bother looking further, so you can type names, or let's say 812D. So 812D. You can find them by commit ID. And you can see here on the right side, it's doing the preview. Shift arrow keys. Oops. Shift arrow keys. Scroll preview. Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Let's go on to one of my favorite uses of FZF, and that is in Vim. So there is a slide for this. The first thing I have to tell you about is that the file fe.mrc. These two lines are important. These are plugins. I use plugins in Vim. There's lots of plugin managers. I'm using Vundle here. That's why it says plugin instead of plug or something else. And I have two FZF plugins. One is called FZF, and the other one is called FZF.vim. And they are different. They do two different things. FZF, the first one, supplies only the underlying construction kit for building things out of FZF inside Vim. And we're going to do that in a little bit. FZF.vim provides a whole bunch of pre-constructed functions built on FBS. So for instance, if I say colon files, it brings up the standard file selector that we've been looking at. It brings up a preview over on the right side. And if I hit return, it opens that as a new buffer. And I'm using unimpaired. That's why I can say square bracket V to go to the next buffer. If I wanted that to have been a window, I could have said Control T. And now it's a window. And if I close just that window, the other buffer remains open. I could have opened it in a split. Yeah. And I forget how to open it in a vertical split. That is unfortunate. Files is not the only command. G files doesn't forget. Buffers shows you a list of all your open buffers and lets you switch quickly between them by name. One of my favorites is colors. So, for instance, evening. This is a new color scheme. Let me open everything. Go to Peach Puff. Let's go to Elf Lord. Oh, it's just like Peach Puff. But my favorite, the one I normally use for everything, is paper color. Whoops. Boy, there's more though. We can say RG, use ripgrep, and we can search for specific things like bat, multiple select in that one too. AG, we can look for lines in the text. We can look for tags. I've built tags. So tags, because I'm in a world here that includes my vimrc, tags also include the keys that I've defined. So for instance, leader O, as you can see here, is close nerd tree and run FBF, which is the files version. This similarly works with buffer tags. You can do it with windows. You can do it with history. You can do it with snippets. You can do it with commit. You can do it with commands. I've got a couple that I really like here, which is apps. So let's, for instance, say, what is $G? Oh, and this finds things that end with $, end with G. So space RG runs RG, space EG runs tab new of my gvimrc. You can find key maps that way. But the absolute best use of this, of FDF in Vim with the fdf.vim plugin, is help. So help on FDF, for instance. Let's actually look at FDF run. You can go straight to the help that you care about, and it covers all of the help files at once. And you can type and retype until you find the thing that you want. All right, let's actually use the first thing that we looked at. Which is just the FDF plugin. Let's use that to build a function. It turns out we were just looking at the help for FDF. And this teaches you about FDF run and how to use it and whatnot. So I'm going to just do it right now. FDF #run is a function. When you're writing Vim script functions, it's a style, it's a convention to separate your package name from your function name with a £sign. £sign is just an ordinary character as far as Vim naming goes. This is not required by the language. It's just a convention. So I am going to call the function FDF run and give it a dictionary. And that dictionary specifies one thing, that the sync for FDF, in other words, what it's going to do with what you find, is it's going to open a new tab for editing. If you don't give FDF a source, it's just going to use the default FDF command, which is, in my case, FD. It's going to find files. So let's run this. And it uses full screen. It's not using any of my nice parameters, but it's finding files. And if I pick one, mcfly.bash, it opened it in a new tab. What if we actually pick a source as well? Right now we're in .files. Let's cd into bash topics.b, and now it's FDF run just like we used before, but this time there's a source, and the source is the ls function, and the sync is still tab edit. So let's run this. So now this is, instead of the result of calling FD, it's calling ls. So let's look at everything. And it opens that in a new tab for editing. But what about all my options that I had that make FDF look the right way, use the right size menu, start in the right place? Well, it turns out that to get that to happen, you wrap your inner dictionary using FDF wrap. So FDF wrap of this inner dictionary adds a whole bunch of stuff. Let's actually just look at what FDF wrap does by itself. Actually, I think we have to say echo. So it turns our dictionary into something bigger. It's got options, it's got a window size, it keeps my source and sync, but it's all about customizing that dictionary that I send in. So now we're going to run that wrap dictionary. So now we get the smaller thing instead of the full screen thing. And I can type everything, and it opens it in another window. If I can click between. And they have different purposes. So now that we've defined a good way to call FDF, let's turn it into a command. So to define a command in Vim, you use :command. The command name is going to be ls, and then this is the X command that substitutes for ls. Whenever you type ls, what's really going to happen is it's going to do what we just did. It's going to call FDF run on the wrapped inner dictionary. So the exclamation point after command means delete any existing command by this name. So now I can say command ls, :ls, and it brings up, and I can just open that back. But commands can be more complicated than that. You know, command is a command, and command takes an exclamation point, which is sort of a parameter. How can I have such a parameter myself? Well, you can define a command that takes the bang option. So I'm going to define a command, deleting any existing one that has the name ls. It's going to support bang, and it's going to pass an extra parameter to FDF run. No, to FDF wrap, which is this bang 0. If you do supply a bang, this bang becomes the exclamation point, and 0 becomes 1, and that gets passed into wrap and does the right thing. If you don't supply a bang, then bang turns into nothing, and 0 becomes 0, and FDF wrap does the right thing. So now we have defined a function. This parameter, by the way, is the full screen parameter. So now if I say ls, I get the little screen. But if I say ls bang, I get the full screen. So we're almost there. We almost have everything we want. But now we want a mapping for an actual keystroke. So let's make leader Q, and my leader is the space key, be ls in normal mode. And let's make leader shift Q be the full screen version with the bang. So now I can say space Q, and it opens the little one. Or I can say space shift Q, and it opens the big one. And that is using FDF to build your own commands in Vim. So I want to talk, before we end this up, a little bit about Homebrew. I'm on a Mac. That's what you're seeing right now. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But I use Brew because that's the best package manager for the Mac. It turns out you can also use Brew on Linux. Yeah, it's annoying to have a second package manager, but it supplies packages that you might not be able to get all the time with your normal package manager. And just like your normal package manager, it's Brew Update and Brew Upgrade. If you don't have it in your normal package manager, Brew might have it. It's incredibly useful on Mac OS. I use it all the time. In fact, quit all brew list. These are all the packages I have installed with brew. There's SD, for instance. And there's HTTPie, for instance. And there's Image Magic, from which we use Convert. Things to know about Homebrew is it's written in Ruby. And I use it on both my Mac and on my Ubuntu server. But before we go, I want to talk about everything that I used here. I did connect briefly to my Ubuntu server, but we didn't use it for anything. Everything that I did on my Mac, I could have done on my Ubuntu server the exact same way, because they're running the exact same packages and the exact same dot files, and they have the exact same capability. I was using Keycaster. Here you see a link to where Keycaster lives. That's what showed my keys. My Mac is on 12.2 at the moment, and my bash is 5.1.16. The bash that ships with macOS is something like 3 or 4. It's terrible. I installed this version of bash from Homebrew. I'm giving this presentation with MDP, and here's a link to that. It's a command line tool that takes a markdown file. MDP stands for Markdown Presentation. It takes a markdown file as the input. And I'm going to make the source file available to you so you can follow the links if you want to. But it looks weird. It's got weird stuff in it, so be warned. The terminal that I'm using is iTerm2, fondly known as just iTerm, especially since it's version 3. The font that I'm using is the JetBrains Mono Nerd font. So that's JetBrains Mono modified by the Nerd font people to have all the special icons and symbols in it. But I also provide a link to the unmodified JetBrains Mono font. I happen to love this font. I think it's great. The Vim I'm running is 8.2. The theme I use is paper color. And the reason the status bar and buffer bar look weird is because I'm using Vim Airline. And my dot files, which I also provide a link to, are all open source. You're welcome to download them and use them for anything you need. So this is what we talked about. We talked about TLDR, which is Simplified Community-Driven Man. BAT, which is Get Aware Syntax Highlighted Cat. AsFree, a couple multi-file search and replace tools, SD and Amber. We talked about EXA, which is much better than LS, is Get Aware, does trees, has colors, the work. HTTPie, JQ, mcfly, which I really like, but we didn't do that good a demonstration of. ripgrep, which is one of my staples. SD, a lot better than Find, so much more sane. FZF, we talked a lot about. Homebrew, just a little. The main thing I want to point out is there's a lot of Rust in there. A lot of Rust. So at this point, I think we can open it up for questions, comments, and is there anything else I can demonstrate or show you?
Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask any questions. Go ahead, Roller.
Sure. Just as a joke, can you show SL? And do you know any other tools kind of like that, just for fun?
SL?
Yeah, steam locomotive.
That takes way too long. Honestly, it's a horrible joke, and nobody should install it, because every time that you mistype LS, you have to sit and wait for like 5 seconds while this thing draws an ASCII art or whatever. Yeah, ASCII art locomotive across your terminal.
Apparently it's available if I wanted it.
Yes,
But
you
I-
don't. You don't.
I don't. I
Yes,
Okay.
you do not.
Other questions? You guys are amazingly satisfied with my presentation. There are no
And-
questions.
We will have links to the presentation up on the website as soon as we get them. So
Yeah, there was so much there that we're all still absorbing it.
yeah,
I think.
definitely. I'm gonna have
My
to watch the
hope-
video several times over.
My hope is to watch the video and write down the time codes of where each tool starts and make those be a pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comment section.
That would be great.